Good morning, Adam. How are you?
Good morning, Simon. I'm very well. How are you?
We are fantastic, actually. Yeah, absolutely great. It's obviously all starting to motor on. The bounce is still looking robust, isn't it? There, I know that you will see some other sides of the business, which we'll obviously come on to it in a little moment there. But yes,
Yeah.
in general, it's looking good. So. We're really, really pleased for you to come on the show today. Thanks, Adam. And I think it's a really, really important, obviously, area of the of discussion we're talking about today, because of course, everybody, no matter whether they're thinking about it at the moment, is going to exit this business in some way, aren't they? They are going to, they're going to leave in less than salubrious manner, or hopefully as part of a structured sale, obviously having got the fair rewards for a lifetime of obviously of graft. And so we're going to just touch on those subjects with you in terms of your vast experience, because I think it's fair to say, I looked at your bio again, and we've known each other many years, but where I used to know you initially was when I used to come to your excellent training sessions, because of course I needed to be able to bluff people that I understood estate agency. And I can say thank you to you that you helped even a duffer like me make it in this industry. So you've got a big fan over here anyway, just on that basis.
Well, thank you.
No worries at all. The title of the show is that we're going to be talking about how to buy and sell a lettings business, but we are going to bounce around and talk about sales businesses as well, aren't we? And just the state of the market. Now, I mentioned that that you were doing training, and I think it's fair to say, isn't it? As you've been in this industry for 40 years, and that's how you started, but you've deviated more and more away from the training side because this has become just such a red hot area, hasn't it, in terms of this merger?
Yes, I've sold businesses for 25 years, but it's become a bigger and bigger part of what I do in recent years. So I still do some training for my long-standing clients, but the great majority of the work, I've now got 7 people, 7 staff on the mergers and acquisition side of the business, and that very much is our main focus now.
Yeah, that's okay. That's interesting. So can we start off with kind of buying the businesses? Because of course that's a lot of companies at the moment. Look, none of us have gone into this lockdown willingly, and it's all the normal caveats about how terrible it is. But it is true that this sort of scenario creates opportunities, doesn't it? And that there are many people out there at the moment that are looking to grow their businesses, and this is a particularly hot out there in that respect, isn't it? Do you want to just elaborate a little bit on that?
I will, Simon, and I think the fundamental thing is that letting businesses have performed remarkably well despite the lockdown. And if you've got a managed letting business, the tenants are in the property, and for the time that they're there, you'll get £51 a month every month that they're there without any problems. Most of the tenants are still paying their rent. And although letting businesses have had fewer move-ins over the period of the lockdown, they're now very quickly making up for lost time. And most letting businesses are trading at 90% or better of their previous fee levels. So that is seen as really good recession-proof income. And because of that, the demand for good letting businesses has increased since the lockdown rather than reduced. And we've got sales agents who put some money aside in the good years and are now using it to buy up letting turnover to replace any lost sales turnover. So that there's been a lot of people buying for that reason. And we've got existing letting agents who know that if they buy an extra couple of £100,000 of turnover and drop it into their own office down the road, they will make £100,000 pure profit on that, which just makes their business so much more profitable and more efficient. So there's a lot of consolidation going on. There's a lot of sales agents wanting to increase and grow their letting business. And it's interesting, when you look at the businesses that are still doing well, they are the businesses that are 50-50 sales and lettings, or more lettings than sales. And the ones that are having a more difficult time at the moment is the sales only businesses. So, lettings is suddenly in tremendous demand.
Everything you said there, it makes perfect sense. But the one thing that I can't get my head around is, when are some agents going to learn? After the last recession, where obviously it was again lettings that largely, took businesses through that. It was obviously sales fell off the side of the cliff. You've got a steady income stream from lettings. A lot of people said, "Oh, we're going to build and develop the lettings business," but why do you perceive that some, quite mid to large size businesses don't have the kind of lettings businesses they deserve at the moment?
Yes, and if you are a business that gets 90% of your revenue from sales and 10% from lettings, you are very vulnerable at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that those firms didn't grow lettings after the last downturn is, number one, it's actually quite expensive to buy letting businesses. So there's the cash flow issue. Number two, it takes a long time to build a letting business. Because landlords are very loyal to their agents, and whatever you offer them, they have a tendency to stick with the agent that they already have. And even if they do want to change, they won't change agents until the next change of tenancy, which would easily be a year ahead. So it really is quite hard and quite expensive to build a letting business from scratch, which is why they sell for such good prices. So there's a big difference between knowing that you should expand lettings and being able to do so. And I think the final thing is that lettings is not a business you can dabble in anymore. And unless you understand the rules and have got an ALA qualified letting manager, that can make sure the business is compliant. People who are dabbling in lettings are making terrible mistakes with enormous potential fines, and it really is no longer a business for amateurs.
Yes, I mean that's just very true, isn't it? With compliance and everything now, it's becoming a logistical quagmire, isn't it? And indeed,
it's absolutely terrifying. I did an article on this for one of the trade magazines recently, and I said it's a little bit like being caught for doing 31 miles an hour in the 30-mile-an-hour limit, and the police, confiscating your car and crushing it and putting your eyes out with a red hot poker so you can never drive again. And the fines for tiny mistakes are just terrifying. And I think that's what's motivating some of the smaller letting agents to get out, is they're just too frightened of compliance.
That's really. By the way, it's still too soon for me to be able to talk about doing 31 in a 30. So I'm not I'm not able to relax on that just that. Yeah.
You're still on your 11 points, are you?
Yeah, I absolutely am. So that's really interesting. So is there because you do a huge amount again, which we're going to talk about in terms of consultancy with agents, not just at the point of sale or indeed purchase. Is there in your mind a sort of number in terms of the managed properties where it makes sense, where it really starts to deliver value? Is it 100 properties, 200 properties? I know that it depends on the rental and everything else, but is there a barometer in terms of where a lettings business starts to kick on?
Well, it is almost impossible now to run a letting business that does less than £100,000 a year. And that really is the threshold where you can afford a dedicated member of staff who knows what they're doing and can run it as a proper division of the company. So that probably is the starting point. The days where a sales agent did 20 grand of lettings turnover, I think those have gone forever, and it's just dangerous to continue in that way. So probably 100,000 a year is the absolute minimum for a proficient letting business. Yeah. You've got some people trading from home who are professional letting agents who manage a lower turnover and still make a living out of it. But generally speaking, the bigger the business, the more profitable it is, because you get the economies of scale. And if you take a business that's doing 500,000 as a standalone letting office, then the owner might make 15 or 20% profit from that if it's a well-run business. So 75, 100,000 pounds. If you take that 500,000 turnover and drop it into another firm down the road, you'll make 50% margin, so 250,000 pounds. Yeah. So it is. The economics are irresistible, and that's why there is such a rapid consolidation going on of the industry. And I think in 10 or 15 years' time, will be like the supermarkets, where we have Tesco's and Sainsbury's and, Asda and the big boys, and the opportunity to start a new supermarket now, it would be almost unimaginable how you do that.
No, it makes sense. Well, look, you've already got somebody. Shelley just asked, how do we register with Adam to be notified about any portfolios available for sale? I've put my email details on there as well. And if you want to, Adam's got, if you look at Adam Walker on the Kerfuffle website, just there's a contact us if interested, and we'll pass on all of those to you, Shelley, and anyone else who's interested. So,
lovely. And you can register via the website. There's a page to do it. We've got a brand new website which went live last Monday. So we just thought that the lockdown was a good opportunity to attend to things like that we've been meaning to do for ages. So you can now register online as a buyer, or if you've got a specific requirement, then you can email us and we'll respond personally.
Just give us the URL there, Adam, so that anyone can.
So it's www.adamjwalker.co.uk, and don't forget the J.
Of course, I'm going to be Paxman-like here. Can you tell me what the J stands for, or will I be? Or do you have to kill me?
It's J for John, but the more important issue is that Adam Walker is owned by a prominent right-wing political activist who got the domain name about a week after the web was invented, and, so I don't want anyone to mix the two of us up. Thank you.
Let me just clarify that for anyone watching who does think I'm. I don't look particularly far right, do I, in this top? But you can never be sure these days. Okay, Adam. But I think that's fascinating. What are the pitfalls? Just the obvious pitfalls when looking to buy a business that you can give people some advice on straight off the bat.
Well, we offer an acquisition service to help people to buy a business that they found directly. And it is very important to get professional advice when you're buying a business, because particularly if you're doing it for the first time, if you buy the wrong business, there can be so much wrong with it that the potential fines could be several times the purchase price. And I've seen some absolute horrors over the years. So if there are things like missing NRL1 forms for overseas landlords, the fine for that is 3 years back tax plus 100% penalty. So you could be talking a £30,000 fine for a single property there if the landlord has not paid the tax. If you've got a missing HMO license, you could be fined £30,000 for a single property on that.
So you can literally wipe out your profit margin just with one of these fines.
I mean, the worst book I've ever seen was a book where the owner sadly had Alzheimer's and had just completely lost the plot. Yeah. And we agreed a sale on it, and when we got to the due diligence stage, it was like the burglars had been in, with bits of paper stuffed in every cupboard in no order. And it suddenly occurred to me that he couldn't remember things that we discussed 10 minutes previously, and that's where it suddenly twigged that he had dementia. Very, very sad end to a career. But that business was sold for £1.25 million. There were over £10 million worth of potential fines and liabilities because of mistakes that he'd made in his compliance procedures. So that is by far the biggest issue, is to have a professional due diligence person go in and look at what you're buying before you buy it. And the problem is you become liable for those mistakes the very day that you take the business. So if there's a missing gas safety certificate and the tenant dies of carbon monoxide poisoning, it is the new owner that goes to prison, not the person that sold the business and made the mistake last year. So you've got to be very, very careful about checking the quality of the book before you're buying it. And the other problems are how much is it worth? And you can have two businesses with the same turnover, and one is worth 3 times as much as the other because of the way that the book is made up. So we can advise on what to pay for it. We can advise whether you should buy it at all. We can help to negotiate the price either openly or from behind the scenes, as people prefer. And then we can make sure that the due diligence is done properly, so that you're not buying, a pile of trouble that can come back to haunt you later.
So best advice is certainly just use an expert. Talk to yourself, avoid those pitfalls, and indeed the potentially huge fines around the back of it. That strikes me as 101 lesson today. So that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Just in general, Adam, is now a good time to be selling a lettings business?
I think it is a good time. The prices have recovered significantly. There was a big drop after the Brexit referendum vote 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And the prices since then have increased by 40 or 50%. So, we are certainly now up close to the all-time best prices that you could get for a letting business. I'm not sure that prices are going to go up much more because there are some challenges in the letting market in the near future. There could be landlords leaving because of the economic climate. People might get into financial difficulty and need to sell. The compliance burden and the cost of complying with it is getting greater with every day. There's the new electrical legislation has just come in to the normal government confusion.
Never stops.
Where, are we liable for it or not? It's just terrible confusion over
Yeah.
So I think prices are pretty close to an all-time high. There are plenty of buyers.
What are we talking about in terms of the multiple? So what would it? What's the multiple now? And what was? Did you say the highest? What was it at its highest? Did you say it was like 1.4 times the rental book?
Well, it's a common misapprehension that letting businesses are sold purely on a multiple of the total turnover, because they're not. And there are very different types of turnover. So you get different multipliers for different types of turnover according to how certain it is to continue. So the highest multiplier is for managed turnover, because once the tenant is in the property, you get your £51 a month every month forevermore with no argument. It. There is a lower turnover for setup fees, because that depends on the net change of tenancy, and it's hard to know how long each tenant is going to stay for. There is a much lower multiplier for let-only income, because there's no recurring income there and there's no certainty. So the let-only books sell for a lot less than the managed books. And also we need to look at income from things like student lettings, which has been hit quite badly this year. HMO properties, because they cost more to look after than ordinary properties, because you get 6 calls that the boiler won't like rather than just the one. And there's also more legislation to comply with. You also need to look at the multiple landlords. If there's a landlord with 100 properties, that's more vulnerable than 100 people with 1 property each. So there are lots of different factors, but the range, we get over 1.5 times turnover for a really good managed book, and sometimes we'll get 10 or 15% above that with competitive bidding. And for a really scrappy let-only book, it might only be half the turnover. But there is a big range on that scale according to the quality of the book that's being sold.
Okay, that makes perfect sense there. And ditto in terms of the sales business is now. I think we spoke literally just before lockdown, didn't we? And you said that the value of sales businesses was really at an all-time low, and therefore a tremendous time to buy. Is that still the case?
Yes, and sadly, the sales businesses have been hit quite hard by the virus. There's been a lot of disruptions of that market, and although sales agents are now busy again, I think the jury is out on whether this is just going to be making up for all the deals we didn't do over the last 3 months, or whether it's going to be a sustained V-shaped recovery. So the jury's out on that, and the buyers are very cautious. Sales businesses have always sold for less than letting businesses, because there's no certainty about the future. You can be the best estate agent in England, then the virus comes along and suddenly your income collapses. Whereas with lettings, the income continued regardless. So they've always been worth less than letting businesses, but the disparity between the prices at the moment is the greatest I've ever seen. And if someone is feeling brave, buying a sales business at the moment will be an absolute bargain. They would be at the moment selling for maybe a quarter what the normal price would be, maybe less than that. So there are some real bargains to be had for the brave. And a lot of people who've made a lot of money over the years have gone in and done things that are the opposite of what everyone else is doing. But my advice to anyone selling a sales business would be, if you can, delay that sale for the time being and wait for the market to recover. It will do at some point, because the market is cyclical, and we will get back to better prices at some point in the cycle.
Are you able to quantify the actual rhythm of that cycle? How long in general does it take to change? Can it just flick like that, or does it normally take kind of a year or two to switch back again?
Well, it's normally, the cycles in the housing market tend to run at sort of 8 or 9 years. If you look at the previous boom and bust, this is my 5th downturn in the market in my career. We had a very long good period, which ended very suddenly in 2008. And if you remember, Gordon Brown said that he'd abolished the cycle of boom and bust in the economy due to his expert stewardship of the economy as the Chancellor. So we had a very long cycle then. But what happens is that prices grow and grow and grow. And then just at the point where they probably hit the limit anyhow, there is an outside event such as the virus or the Brexit referendum vote or Northern Rock going bankrupt and Lehman Brothers going bankrupt, or the 1973 oil crisis. There is some artificial event which deprives people of confidence. Then the market drops very, very suddenly overnight, and it then usually drops too far and overcorrects itself, and then gradually it picks up momentum again. So the downturn happens overnight. The recovery often takes a year, 2 years, 3 years. The 2008 recovery was very quick. In London, we were back to previous prices in 12 months. The 1988 downturn took 4 years for prices to recover. So every recession is a little bit different, and I think all the experts at the moment are wondering what the recession recovery is going to be like from the virus this time. But no one really knows, because we can't say, well, last time we had a pandemic, this is what happened. Which is why people are just waiting to see. But we all hope it's going to be an artificial recession and a rapid recovery, but we're just going to have to wait and see.
For my sins, I've got an economics degree, and I haven't got a Scooby-Doo what my peers are saying is going to happen. So they don't call it the dismal science for no reason.
Well, I learn something new about you every time I speak to you, Simon. So
there you go. So there we are. That my bronze swimming certificate, I'm very proud of. So, you mentioned outside forces, and of course, we're in the middle of the biggest one at the moment that people simply haven't been, as you said, everyone has a different flavour. How has the virus impacted on values?
On the value of businesses, well, on the value of letting businesses, if anything, they've gone up rather than down, because it's seen as good recession-proof income. There's not been a huge rise, but there has certainly been a hardening of the prices for good managed letting businesses. We've just had a big one that we sold in East London, and we had 4 people competing for it, and it went for 12% over the guide price, which was, astonishing. Wow. But the value of sales businesses has just fallen off a cliff, and I'm not quite sure when that's going to recover. And interestingly, the value of let-only businesses has been hit hard, because there's no recurring income. You only get the transactional income when somebody moves in, and outside of London, there are no renewal fees in most businesses, so you get nothing until the next change of tenancy.
Yeah. So can you give a flavour around, based on the different size of the business, how many bidders would you expect to be competing for a business at the moment?
Well, we would normally have 5 people competing in the first round.
Yeah.
And we think 5 is enough to get a good competition going, but we don't want to expose it to more people than we have to. And then if one of those 5 drops out, we'll put another one on in their place. So what we're trying to do is to get 5 horses to the finishing line at the same time. And then when everyone's ready, we'll set a closing date for offers. We'll ask them to make their best offer in writing, so we could look not just at the headline price, but all the other conditions as well. What are the payment terms? How long have you got to wait for your money? How much is paid up front? How much is deferred? There are dozens of different criteria to look at, and you've got to look at all of those criteria to make sure you've got the best price. And then we'd accept one offer and normally give them somewhere between 2 or 3 months to complete their purchase. So we normally have 5 people in the first round and then replace them if one of them drops out.
I think that's a really, because to somebody like me, again, a pleb like me, obviously I simplistically think, well, you've got to have as many different bidders as you can. And my only experience that totally made me realise what you're saying is absolutely true is obviously when we did sell the repeat business, there was a huge number of expressions of interest, of course, and I couldn't get my head around, I think it was KPMG who were representing us. They shut.
I can't understand how I missed out on that deal.
Well, look, you might get them next time round. They'll believe me, they're going to go for much more than when I was there. Not least because they haven't got my expenses. But what was fascinating was they did shut down a lot of those other ones because we need to remain focused. And I think from our point of view, our business was particularly complicated. The level of due diligence. But it's simply servicing that, all of those due diligence demands is a huge job from anyone selling the business, isn't it?
Well, we would only allow one party to conduct the due diligence because it is so time consuming.
Yeah.
So we would use a different process to KPMG. But the reason that we go with 5 is, number one, we don't want something leaking out prematurely because that could do terrible harm to the business. And the 5 would usually be companies that we know and have dealt with previously and trust not to leak something. So we think 5 is enough to get the competition. The second thing is, we would not want to sell to somebody that we've never dealt with previously when there is a better buyer out there that's bought 10 businesses before and we know to be reliable and well funded. And the oldest trick in the book is that they'll agree a price with you, get you right up to the very last moment. Literally sometimes when the staff have been told the business is being sold, and then you get the phone call on the day of completion to say, I've been reading the Times this morning, there's a very nasty story about the economy, we're going to chip you 100 grand, and if you don't like it, you can get stuffed. And it just makes you absolutely furious when that happens. And we know who it is that does that, so we'll avoid them. So we would rather have 5 buyers that we know and trust and we know are going to behave properly later in the sale, and we know have got the money and are not going out trying to borrow it, which is very hard in this marketplace. And we don't want an offer from someone that is less reliable, when we've got so many good buyers to compete with. And only if the initial ones reject it, we then go to the list of, the buyers that are borrowing to buy, and we've got, less knowledge about their reputation.
So that's really interesting. So gazundering goes on even in this realm. So other than not inviting those people who have a track record for it, is there things you can put into the process that kind of reduces the possibility of that happening?
Well, at least 3/4 of private sales fall through, and they normally fall through for a reason that you could have predicted at the outset if you'd asked the right questions. So a lot of my time goes into making sure the deal is properly set up and properly explained. And if it's going to go wrong, we want it to go wrong right at the very outset before people have spent thousands of pounds on legal fees. So the most common reason for a sale going wrong is that when we ask for the heads of terms, which is a 4 or 5 page summary of what's been agreed, when the heads of terms come through, what is in them is not what we think has been agreed in the verbal discussions. And if that is going to be the case, you might as well know it a week into the deal before any money has been spent, rather than 3 months down the line where people have spent thousands. And the second most common reason for a sale falling through is that when you get to the due diligence visit, the income is less than we were told it was, or there's more sales income and less lettings income, or there's more let-only income and less managed income, or there are horrendous compliance mistakes, such as we had one where they'd not served prescribed information correctly. They've been sending out a one-page summary rather than, all of the other supplementary pages. And there's, I think, 21 pages of information that should go out. Now, the fine for that is 3 times the deposit on every property. So you multiply that by the number of properties, there's hundreds of thousands of pounds of fines. And there's nothing that could be done to correct that retrospectively. Once the offence has been committed, it can't be mitigated. So that was the end of that. So those are by far the most common reasons for things falling through. And the process that we use is designed to identify those problems within the first 2 or 3 weeks. So if it is going to fall through, it falls through at the outset. And we also do a lot of preparatory work. We'll double check the turnover we're given with the accounts and cross-reference the different expenses, so we know that the figures are looking likely. Otherwise, we get you get an offer and then it just gets reduced a few days later because the figures are not what we were told in the first place.
And that can just upset the whole process, can't it?
It just wastes everyone's time and makes everyone very cross.
You've got, I mentioned you were in the business for 40 years, and it shows because you've got an Australian fan club here.
Good heavens above.
Well, just to be clear, I'm assuming he's calling you the absolute legend rather than me, but that's my narcissism talking. But
now,
anyway.
Louis used to be one of the senior managers at Romans.
He absolutely did, yeah. He's, and in fact, you've also got Steve Abdi as well on here, the original guru. There you are. So they're all wearing their Adam Walker gear to doing it. So, of course, you have worked. We worked together on that project, didn't we? Actually, when Romans went live with the repeat software.
Well, I have to say, Romans were one of my favourite clients I've ever worked with in 25 years because you would give them some advice. And I could give 2 companies the same advice on a business review. With one company, you go back a year later and they'd have done none of it or 10% of it. With Romans, they will put their heart and soul in every single thing. And we did some astonishing work for Romans, and they got some amazing results. I always remember when they put their fees up by 0.5% to deal with the recession in 2008, and all the valuers said we're never going to achieve it, and they damn well did. It's just an absolute textbook example of how to get every penny of value out of training and consultancy work. So I really enjoyed the work I did for them.
Proper powerhouse, aren't they?
Yeah.
You just touched earlier as well in terms of how buoyant the market is. I think that one of the corporates, at least, said that the acquisitions were off the agenda for the time being. Are all the corporates back and bidding at the moment? I mean, they have been fairly quiet since the lettings fee ban, haven't they?
Yeah.
But what's the picture there?
Well, most of our sales recently have been to independents and investors, not corporates. And I'm sure there will be back. Because once you start a buy and build strategy, it's very hard to stop it halfway through. So I'm sure there will be back soon. Some have returned to the market already. I'm sure others will follow. But, it is interesting how volatile the market is for buyers. And you can go to a buyer one week and they're behind their target for acquisitions and desperate to buy anything and paying great prices. Yeah. And then a few weeks later, they've made some good acquisitions, they've spent their budget and they've lost their appetite and are making really mean offers on things. The appetite from each of the buyers does change literally from week to week. And certainly for the last year, the great majority of our sales have been for independents and investors, not the big corporate chains.
That's really interesting. Just at the moment, how long does it take actually for a sale to go through? And has that length of time changed? Is it now quicker to do deals? Is it taking longer? Can you just elaborate there?
The length is about the same as it always has been, and it normally takes us between 6 and 8 weeks to run the marketing competition and get the best price agreed. It takes a couple of weeks to do all the anti-money laundering stuff, and before a business can go on the market, then we've got to anti-money launder the owners, in a proper way. I can't believe how many amateurs who are trying to do what I do from their kitchen table and have not registered for money laundering, and they're going to get the shock of their lifetime when HMRC knock on the door and, start finding them huge sums of money. But the anti-money laundering does take a week or two to do. The marketing campaign, it typically takes about 6 weeks, and that gives us a chance to expose it to all the good buyers and get a competition going to get the best price. And then if it's an asset sale, we give them 2 months to get the sale through. If it's a share sale, which is more complicated, we give them 3 months to get the sale through. And most sales complete on the last day of the month, so it would then be rounded up to the next month end. So it's normally between 4 and 5 months from start to finish. And that really hasn't changed very much. Well, it's not changed at all as a result of the lockdown.
So let's pretend, thank you, Adam. Let's pretend that I'm a prop tech legend. I've got a bit of disposable cash. What would you say to me? You already said, obviously, if you were brave to go to the market. I don't think you added stupid, which would have definitely meant I'd done.
Well, I don't think it is stupid. I think it would be a wonderful time to buy a great residential sales brand. And by the way, we are not taking on pure sales businesses at the moment because we can't sell them. So I'm not saying this to try and earn a fee. I'm saying it because I think that for people who are brave, it is a genuinely good opportunity. But most people don't want to do that, and they see lettings as a much more predictable acquisition.
Sorry, you said when we spoke last time that actually when you went through the figures, it really doesn't make, if you were thinking about starting up, clearly as many are at this lockdown period or post-lockdown period, that it just simply doesn't make sense, given the price of sales businesses at the moment, to do that by yourself. You might as well buy an established business. Is that still the case?
It's much cheaper to buy an established business because when you look at the cost of a cold start, and you look at the premises and the fit out costs, and the big issue is the 6 months that you're paying salaries and marketing and all the other running costs before any money comes in. Because, however good you are, it takes 6 months to get a house onto the market, get it through and start getting some fees. So you look at the cost of the cold starts, and you can go out and buy a sales business for its pipeline value. So, and then you get all the stock free of charge, a ready fitted out office. I mean, why on earth would anyone want to do a cold start when businesses are as cheap as that?
And look, I mean, one of the biggest things, of course, is if a business has been going for many years and hopefully it's relatively shipshape, you, of course, get the database of past clients as well, don't you? To be able to, there's so much value locked away in there, isn't there? To be able to...
There is. I mean, where I was brought up, there was an estate agent who was the absolute market leader when I was, a child bearer in the 70s and early 80s. And his business shut down in the 88 recession. And about 15, 20 years later, his son opened under the same name and became the market leader overnight, right. Because people still remembered that name and that brand from all those years previously. So there is value in sales business. I think their value is being horribly underestimated at the moment. But, very few people agree with that. So, at the moment, we're focusing on letting businesses, not sales businesses. We do sell businesses that are half and half. And, because the letting prices are so strong, they've made up for the drop in sales prices. So they're still worth selling. But the pure sales businesses, there is currently no market for. And, what I think is irrelevant, I don't make the market. I just run the competition.
Yeah. So going back to the original, why should I? Never mind the sales side, but what would you say? Elevator pitch is the reason I should be buying a lettings business right now.
Well, I think, are you an investor from outside or an existing letting business that wants to expand? Because the reasoning is a little different for each.
I think let's keep it nice and insular. Let's pretend we're an existing business.
Well, if you're an existing business, then the mathematics are just irresistible. You are a business that is at the moment doing £500,000 of turnover in lettings, and you're making £100,000 profit. You buy the business next door that's also doing 500,000 of turnover. If you drop that into your office, you've got no premises cost, no marketing, all the economies of scale on the staffing. You will make 250,000 pure profit from that. So your profit goes from 100,000 to 350,000 by buying the business next door. The cost of that business will be about 750,000, which means you get your money back in 3 years. And I can't think of any other investment that gives you a 33% return on capital with such a very low level of risk.
No, it's incredible. No, it's incredible. And what is the likely return on capital then, if you make that investment? Is that what? How would you ballpark it for somebody thinking about that? What should they be expecting?
Well, for buying an add-on business in the area that you're already operating, your return on capital will be somewhere between 25 and 35%. That would be typical. And that's, a very predictable process. If you're buying a standalone business in a new town, then the return on capital will be less than that.
Okay, and what are the common pitfalls again? You've mentioned a few now, but what are the ones that people make most often?
Well, I think the first thing is not getting accurate information and comprehensive information and paying too much for a business. That's very common. And the second one is not doing the due diligence work properly and buying something that turns out to have lots of hidden problems. So those are the problems for the buyers. For the sellers, the biggest mistake is people selling direct to someone who's approached them out of the blue. And I just absolutely cannot understand why somebody who has spent their whole career saying, we will sell your house for a better price than you could ever get yourself, why on earth would they respond to a direct approach where you get one offer from one person? And I have seen cases where businesses were sold for half what they were worth because, they didn't go to the market and get competing bids for it. And you will never get the best price by taking a bid from just one person. You've got to have a proper competition with people bidding against each other in a proper open way to be sure that the best price and the best terms have been achieved.
That's good. Peter Lawrence saying hello there from Lawrence Rand.
Hello, Peter. Someone else I remember well from Harrow down the road.
Yeah, and we've got Charles Robinson here who's asking, is EBITDA out the window? I'm guessing it's never more relevant, isn't it?
Well, some businesses are sold on profit and some businesses are sold on turnover. So if you take the example of a £500,000 a year letting business, if there is a competitor in the town that wants to buy it, they would pay 1.5 times its turnover, regardless of the profit, because the profit they're making at the moment is irrelevant because they're not going to run it that way. They're going to drop it into their own shop and just get that as marginal additional revenue. So businesses like that are sold on turnover, not on profit. Now, the businesses that are sold on profit are businesses where there is no buyer that wants to buy it for break. So if it's in a town in the middle of nowhere and there is no one in that town that's got the desire or the ability to buy the business, and the next nearest town is 10 or 15 miles away, you couldn't move the business 15 miles because you'd lose the landlords. There's no one in the town that wants to buy it, so it has to be sold as a going concern. And if that is the case, then that would be sold on profit, not on turnover. And the other time that we sell on profit is where you've got a business that's got an office with a 25-year lease with no break landlords in it. So the cost of disposing of the lease would be, hundreds of thousands of pounds in this market. They've got staff that have been there for 20 years, and the redundancy cost would be massive. So they can't sell it for breakup because the closure costs would be astronomical. So it has to be sold with the shop and with the premises. And if that is the case, that would be sold on profit, not on turnover. But the great majority of businesses we've sold recently have been sold on turnover, not profit, because they are sold for breakup.
That's fantastic answer. Yeah. You mentioned there one of the dynamics, obviously, and one of the big risks of buying a lettings business is that some landlords don't take particularly well to being transferred ostensibly. So sometimes there can be a churn in that. What is there a rate that you can that you estimate on average that you could expect to churn in a year? 5%.
Well, there is usually a penalty clause that says that if they lose more than X% of the landlords, then there will be a deduction from the price that was paid. And we offer a guarantee on our commission, so we have to make a pro rata refund if the full secondary consideration is not made. And it's very, very rare for that to happen. Yeah. And the penalty normally has a 5 or 10% tolerance. So in my experience, it's very rare for more than 10% of the landlords to leave in the first year. And landlords are pretty sticky. They will usually give the new owners a fair chance. And as long as they give good service, they will normally stick with them. And even in cases where the new owners have made a mess of it, it's rare for there to be more than 10% loss in the first year. They might lose more in the second year, but the 10% in the first year would be about the maximum you'd expect to see.
Perfect.
And the other thing to say, Simon, is that the buyers are now quite sophisticated, and they're not going to buy a business and make a mess of it. They've bought businesses before, they know what they're doing, and they're going to take all the necessary precautions to protect their investment.
So that's improving, the standards there are improving overall.
I mean, I sold my business in 1987 to one of the building societies, and if they wanted to destroy it on purpose, they couldn't have done a better job. But the buyers are not like that anymore. They are pretty sophisticated people.
Okay. Are all lettings businesses the same, Adam?
Oh no, they vary hugely from very profitable, well-run, managed businesses with the compliance in place through to things that are just utter chaos with compliance mistakes and a huge churn of landlords every year. It's like saying our cars all the same. You can buy a brand new V12 Ferrari or a old banger for 50 quid. They really are right across the spectrum.
You were supposed to let me off there and say there were no stupid questions, but but thanks for not bullying me too much. I had to ask the question.
But I mean, from the outside, they all look the same. It's only when you peer under the bonnet you realise just how different they are.
What percentage of businesses business sales that you get involved with? You speak about that some of finding skeletons in the cupboard. What percentage of sales does that sometimes come up?
Well, we normally spot them before they go to the market, and there's quite a few that we just won't take on because, frankly, they're just a load of trouble, and we don't think they're ever going to get through due diligence, and it's just a waste of our time and a waste of the buyer's time and a waste of the owner's time when things are as bad as that. So I will often say to them, look, we can't sell this in its current condition. I will then recommend people that can go in there and help them clean it up, and we can then sell it in a year or two's time. And there's a lot of work I do on the business review side to prepare a business for sale in a year or two later.
So that's a really interesting service you do provide, isn't it? So talk us through. This is getting essentially the business shipshape for sale, isn't it? So that you're not doing it all at the 11th hour. Could you just give a bit of a brief overview of just how that works?
Yeah, so people often come to me and say, I'd like £1 million for the business, and I look at it and say, well, it's only worth £500,000 at the moment. So I say, well, if that is not enough for you, let's look at what the business would need to look like to be worth the £1 million that today the business, looking at what they're doing, and then do a very detailed business plan that sets out where they are now, where they need to be, and all the strategies for getting there. And that would typically be 20 or 30 pages. And then I'll leave them to implement those strategies with a view to selling the business for more money a year or two later. So at any one time, I've got 70, 80, 100 businesses working through that process. And then they sort of pop off the other end, a year, 2 years, 3 years later. But if people come to me and say, I want to sell the business tomorrow, it's too late to make those changes. A lot of them do take a year or 18 months to work through the system. And you can literally double the value of a business if you take the right steps in the 2 or 3 years before you sell it.
Is there an optimum period of time to prepare for sale? Or can you be too early to start that process?
No, not really. The earlier you start, the more things there are you can do. But most people have horizons of no more than 2 or 3 years. So, I have had people who've come to me and said, I'm 50, I want to retire at 60. What can we do to get the business in good shape over that period? But that's quite rare. It's normally they come to me and want £1 million. It's only worth £500,000, and we've got to show them what to do over a couple of years.
Yeah, I love the idea that even though they might not be thinking it at the moment, getting yourself, first of all, it's a great exercise anyway, isn't it? Improving your business and getting it fine tuned. So that kind of cradle to grave element for the business of working with someone like yourself, I can see why that's such an attractive thing.
And I don't think there's anyone else that does that, because, before I did this, I was a partner in my own firm of estate agents, and then I was managing director of Norwich Union Estate Agents. So I have run a major chain. I do understand the business. I don't just know how to sell them. I know how to make them more profitable. So there's really no one else that can help to grow the value of the business, prior to a sale. And a lot of the things are counterintuitive. But even if you're not selling, it would increase the profit, and that's a good thing. You've got
yeah. Well, you don't have to convince me of your skills. I still use your valuation pyramid to.
The triangle.
Out of triangle, iterative improvement. I love it all. Even before it became popular for, was it Dave Brailsford of the cycling team? You were practicing that for ages, weren't you?
Well, I mean, Repeat was a fabulous business in its day, and you went into a market where the software systems that were available at the time were pretty tired and awful, and really did set the market on fire. And that system is still head and shoulders above the others to this day.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time for them. And looking in more generality, what do you think the long-term prognosis is for the lettings industry? Clearly, we've seen a massive long-term trend for more people doing rentals. Where do you see it going?
Well, I think agents have, for most of my consultancy work, has been about increasing revenue, getting premium fee levels, improving marketing, winning market share from others. That's been the focus of my work for a long time. And I think we're now moving into an age where we've got to start looking at cost control and efficiency rather than just growing revenue. And that's something that a lot of firms are still very bad at. And I've got some clients who've got a property manager for 50 properties. I've got other clients who've got a property manager for 250 properties. So just look at the potential for the economies of scale there. I've still got clients who are using very old-fashioned systems, that repairs are dealt with by telephone calls rather than being automated, with the online software systems. So there are tremendous opportunities, I think, for people to improve their efficiency. And one of the benefits of the virus has been to show that people can work from home very efficiently, and that if the office is closed, tenants can still get their repairs done. They don't have to come in and spend an hour telling you why their toilet won't flush and how they tried to mend it with a paper clip and how embarrassing it was when their girlfriend came round and the toilet wouldn't flush. You know, they get online and send you an email, which saves everyone hours. So I think, you know, there will be new ways of working. I think working from home for part of the week will be something that we continue with. And I think that's where letting agents are going to be making their next profit gain, is by having a more efficient system, automating tasks, and you know, cutting some of their salary costs.
Yeah. It just occurred to me there, I don't know if you've sold any of them or looked at valuations. Is there any differential in the type of agency? And what I'm getting at here is, you know, would a traditional agency have a lower multiplier than, for example, an online agency or a hybrid agency? You know, some of the other brokerage models and things like that. I mean, I know that obviously the online agents, the very prominent ones, have a bit of pixie dust or they did do, in terms of obviously being seen as the next big thing. But in general, should there be a reason for differences in valuation?
Well, it's all about the certainty of the future revenue. So if you go outside an estate agency, a dental practice would sell for maybe 8 times profit because people are very loyal to their dentists, and a veterinary practice might sell for 7 because people are very loyal to their vets, and a letting agent on profit might go for 4 or 5 times profit, whereas a sales agent only for 1 or 2. So it's all about the certainty of the future revenue. And I think the fact of the matter is that the online agents have yet to prove the longevity of that model. The jury is out. The only online agent I sold was Hatched, which we sold about 3 or 4 years ago.
Adam's business, yeah.
That was the one. And Connells bought it because they were curious to see whether it had a role to play alongside their traditional business. Yeah. And they ultimately decided that it didn't. But for what they paid for that business, even though ultimately they shut it down, it was a lot cheaper than going out and starting an online business from scratch, like Countrywide did, and then finding that all the technology ended up in the bin afterwards. So I thought that was actually quite an imaginative way of looking at things. And it does seem that the online agents have hit a certain market share and are struggling to get above that market share. But as far as online and hybrid is concerned, I think it's a bit of an artificial distinction. I think what we should be talking about is full service and discount service. Yeah, and whether you've got a high street office or an office on an industrial estate, it doesn't matter. You know, the competition is between people who offer a very proactive service to getting houses sold, with phoning applicants and working hard with phone calls to persuade them to view things, and the agents who just stick it on the internet and wait for someone to buy it. And that really is what's playing out. It's not high street versus non-high street.
Yeah, so it's ignore the taglines again, as you would expect someone in your position. Look at the fundamentals, essentially, isn't it?
And the other interesting thing is how good the online agents have been at online marketing and getting the best from Google and their websites and everything else, and how poor many of the traditional agents have been. And that, I think, is where the high street agents can learn a great deal from their online competitors. Have I lost you, Simon? You seem to have disappeared off the screen. I'm not quite sure.
Don't worry, I'm back.
You're back, okay.
I think my computer was telling me Loose Women was on. Sorry about that.
Well, we've got to get our priorities right.
Just on one other thing. How you mentioned a number of different issues that come up, obviously there. How do you mitigate those when they come up? I mean, you know, obviously each issue has its a slightly different solution, but in general, how do you mitigate any that do come up?
Well, if we look at things like the turnover, the first thing is we double check the turnover against the accounts before we go to market and make sure that the figures are accurate in the first place. But we do sometimes get caught out because things have been misreported in the statutory accounts, and the statutory accounts don't always look at the difference between management income and setup fees, which is an important differentiator in the price. So if that does come up, then we need to renegotiate and say, look, the information you gave us was inaccurate. The buyer is not being a thieving scumbag by trying to reduce the price. This is a perfectly valid response to the change in the figures that we have discovered. And just trying to keep the temperature down and making sure that people negotiate on the facts, not the emotions.
Yeah, which is very difficult to do sometimes, isn't it?
Well, the hardest time to do that is in the partnership splits, and we've had a spate of those recently where people have fallen out over their response to the virus and how their business should respond to it. And I had one that overran this morning, which I did just before this, where there's 5 partners who work together happily for 30 years, and 4 of them want to cut the costs and shut an office and cut everything to the bone and batten down the hatches ready for the downturn. And the 5th one, who I'm dealing with, says that it's immoral to make people redundant and do these things when they've got £1 million of cash in the bank. His partners say, well, just because we've got cash in the bank, we shouldn't waste it by pursuing strategies that are guaranteed to create a loss over the next few months. And they've fallen out.
I hear that Richie Sunak, the Chancellor, is having the same conversations.
Well, I wouldn't envy him his job at the moment.
No. So give us the elevator pitch then, Adam. Why should you sell or buy through a broker?
Or particularly through me, of course.
I was going to finish off with that, but you.
Okay. Well, buying or selling through a broker. If you're buying, we will have made sure that the information is accurate, so you're not wasting your time, and would have made sure that the business is on at a realistic price. We're not going to put something on for 2 million that's only worth $1 million, and we will be pretty sure that the numbers we give you are accurate and comprehensive. And if you're trying to buy directly, you often get a shoebox full of bits of paper or hundreds of spreadsheets that don't correlate with each other. And also, things are far more likely to go through if there is a broker involved, whereas if you're dealing directly with the seller, it's very, very often that sales fall through because of things that should have been discovered right at the very outset. So there's far greater certainty as far as the buyer is concerned. And I can also recommend due diligence experts, accountants, solicitors that will make the process go a lot more smoothly as well. As a seller, you wouldn't sell your own house and you shouldn't sell your own business, because even a bad broker should get more than one person competing for it. And that's how you get the best price, is by having a proper competition where people compete to pay the best price for something. And again, I'll get it through first time, or most of the time, because we know what goes wrong with the sale and can ask the right questions at the outset. And it is just heartbreaking to spend thousands of pounds and 4 or 5 months of your life thinking you sold your business and then finding it all falls through at the last possible moment. And quite hard to pick up the pieces again afterwards.
Well, look, you obviously gave yourself a bit of shout out, but look, I can certainly say, knowing your black book of people, not just that but have actually worked with closely. I know you can't talk about all of them, that the sorts of businesses and very complicated sales that you've done over the years and the figures you've achieved is, it really is second to none. So on that basis, I'm really pleased you've actually come back to us, haven't you? And you've given us a really generous offer for any Kerfuffle members, obviously free to join Kerfuffle. And you have very kindly said you're going to give 10% off that consultative work, and indeed 10% off your normal 3% fee for selling a business. So
that's right. Yes.
you're not going to find better value than that today anywhere on the internet. So we are really appreciative of that. Adam, I know that you don't, it took me having to bend your arm because you don't have to cut your prices for anyone. So I very much value you doing that, and it's appreciated. And I urge anybody to have a conversation with you, even if it's just to have a quick conversation, because, you're the man in the know on this, aren't you?
Well, thank you very much. And, I certainly value your contacts, Simon, that I know you've built up over a lifetime. And, it would be great to work with as many of those as we can. You only sell a business once, so it needs to be.
That's right. Mine were all my contacts were generated at the bar, but that's a different different skill set entirely. Here we got, and one of those who actually I nurtured at the bar and you've worked with. Adam's the best, and is 100% the person to speak to. So it strikes me we can't leave it on a better note than that. Adam, I'd love to catch up with you in a few months' time, see how the market's moving again, maybe catch up on that. But for the meantime, thank you very much.
Lovely to talk to you, Simon. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, Adam.